Our state has some incredible problems. My name is Lynn Hinderrocker. I'm here to talk about that with you and talk about the trends that have shaped this state and dragged us in one direction or another. We're not really we're not realizing the dream we had way back in the early 2000s or even around 2008 or 9 or 10. My name is Lynn Hinderrocker. Welcome to WOWBIZ Nebraska. We're going to get it on right now. Have you ever had somebody tell you you're just not good enough, you're not competitive, you're not able to perform sufficiently? It's a very hard thing to accept. That's what I heard today as I attended a conference, a luncheon about Blueprint Nebraska. Brian Sloan, who heads up the Nebraska Chamber of Commerce, he's new there, about 6 months into it, and he explained to us this is precisely where we're at. Now, he said it in a more interesting way, I guess. He said, we're at a crossroads in this particular state. So welcome to WOWBIZ Nebraska. I'm Lynn Hinderrocker, and I'm here today in a very special edition of WOWBIZ Nebraska to recap for you an exciting meeting that I was able to attend yet today. That's why you see all these notes on my news desk right here in front of me. I'm still assimilating the enormous amount of data that was shared with various community leaders, chamber people, economic development people, and even some candidates for the unicameral here in the state of Nebraska. But it's an exciting moment because a lot of these leaders that we're talking about have not, until recently, have not really acknowledged that Nebraska is at a critical point, a turning point, a pivot point. And really, think about it, why would they? Because if they don't feel there's some way to change or adapt or constructively transition into a new phase here in our state, I'm going to talk about the details, of course, in a few minutes, then why would you even want to talk about it? Why would you want to acknowledge it? That even gives you an excuse to be cynical about it, okay? But we've arrived at that point where honesty and authenticity about where is this state? What do we need to be? What are we trying to become? So that, bottom line, we can attract more people, more revenue, more capital, more employers, and of course, more workers. In fact, one of the statistics that we heard today, it's an incredible statistic, is that here in Nebraska, by the end of this year, there will be, there's an official number and then there's a more interesting unofficial number. The official number is 15,000 jobs in the state of Nebraska that are going to go unfilled. There aren't people applying for the jobs. And obviously, if you're an employer, you've got to have people working for you in order to grow and produce product, create value, generate revenue, pay your taxes, all that good stuff. So it's a big issue. It's a big issue. Now, here's the real number. Here's the unofficial number. 80,000 unfilled jobs in the state of Nebraska by the end of 2018. That is a big, big number. And it really requires some soul searching, some introspection as to how did we get to this point? Is everybody going through this? How did we get to this point, of course? And who are we competing against? I work with a lot of companies out there that develop their strategies and their plans and so on. We talk about competition, and many of them will say, we don't think about it, competition, we don't care about them, we're just going to do our thing, kind of move into the future and, not worry about our competitors. But this particular state can't get away with that any longer. Would you believe, by the way, that not only do we have the adjacent Midwestern states, Kansas and Iowa and so on, that are competitive with the state of Nebraska when we're looking to get companies, right, to move here, or maybe companies to start a company right here in the state. But we're also competing with, and often, by the way, losing, that's a hard word, losing to Texas and North Carolina. All right, these are states that have similar qualities in certain respects to Nebraska. Companies are surveying them and us and so on and so forth. And in too many cases, they're choosing them. All right, so we have this overarching issue. Now, by the way, this issue has been around since, I'm going to say 2002. 2002 was suddenly the year that everybody realized that Nebraska suffered from brain drain, right? Some of our best graduates from universities They grow up in the state, they go to college, and then they decide to leave our state. Maybe they go to Denver, Chicago, Kansas City, Des Moines, wherever they go, and so we're losing their intellectual capital as well as the financial capital that they would help us generate and intensify here in the state. So we have an issue with population. It's really stunningly, understandable, I guess, basic. It's a straightforward assertion. We don't have enough people in the state. We don't have enough opportunities, and yet we have all these other related issues that we have to manage, and we tend to get distracted. All right. Now let me mention some of the issues that are being discussed all the time here in the state of Nebraska, and this provides kind of a backdrop, just as we have the backdrop in the setting here of our set here at KPAO in Omaha, Nebraska. We have these topics provide the backdrop for the problem that I'm going to explain to you today. And this is not just a reporting assignment for me. This is a commentary and maybe a critical analysis. So stick with me, and I will share with you what I believe we're missing. Despite the fact that we are mounting, we're kind of walking up a summit, we're getting ready to climb up together. There's quite a number of people across the state, about 300 or so, that are working with each other at one level or another. Most of them are volunteers. We're all trying to ascend this big mountain. And this mountain is called, who are we and what do we have to become to enter the future successfully and attract resources, both production and consumption here in this particular state. So here's the backdrop to that discussion, to that dialogue about strategy for the entire state. So first of all, budget, right? This is a very budget-conscious, budget-sensitive state. We don't go over budget here in Nebraska. That's an asset. That's a positive thing in most cases. Taxes. Everybody in Nebraska knows that tax reform is a big topic, right? And think about it for just a moment, right? We have a little over 1 million people, 1.5 million people here in the state. We need another 1 million. We need to have 2.5 million people living here in this state so that we can generate enough taxes so that we can have the infrastructure, the educational system, the amenities, right? Because we want to have the same high-quality schools, we want to have the same choices and options that states that have many, many more people have, right? But we have fewer people. That means a smaller tax revenue base. We have a population problem, okay? Now that's just the quantity thing, the quantitative aspect of this discussion. We also have a qualitative issue. And as we go forward with this Blueprint Nebraska project that I'm mentioning here, and I'm going to get into in greater depth, we have a process and a planning process. And that's probably or issue rather, it's the challenge that I want to talk with you more about later on in the show. But here's the backdrop to this entire discussion. Of course, we have budget, we have tax issues, as I've mentioned. We have a workforce problem. Obviously, that's why jobs go unfilled, right? And it's at the high end with thought leaders, knowledge leaders, tech people, those kinds of folks. We don't have enough of those people, but we also have at the other end a lot of laborers, hourly work, and a lot of unemployed or underemployed. Not unemployed. We actually have a very outstanding unemployment or employment rate, shall we say, I think less than 2% or so, even 1.5% out in the Scottsbluff area. So it's an amazingly low unemployment situation. But in Nebraska, as is the case all across the country, there are a lot of working poor people. They are working, but they are barely getting by, barely able to meet the basic necessities of life. And we have that issue here as well, particularly in the rural sector now, after 5 years of being unable to get enough money to offset our costs if we raise an acre of corn. So we have a lot of complex overlapping topics. Also, another issue is economic development. I had a conversation with a national representative, economic development person out of Washington, D.C. He's responsible for Nebraska, Kansas, a number of states in this area. I had a long talk about the nature of economic development. He said it really does, in fact, have to change. Economic development used to consist of wooing big companies, getting warehouses to come in, setting up frontage roads, giving them free electricity for 6 months or a couple of years or whatever. That was a classic economic development play. But economic development is not the same today. And I'm not sure all of us have embraced that idea and fully adapted to that. So we've got to think about economic development and all of the problems that are associated with that. So we're looking at big change here in this state. It's a serious issue. It's an opportunity, by the way, to think differently. You know, you see people talking about change in organizations, and they say, you know, it's not just what you think about and focus on, it's how you think. Big difference. How you think about the process. Right? And I think that may be true in this case, insofar as this massive initiative, this project that's statewide. Some brilliant people are involved, many of them CEOs. The CEO of Union Pacific in Omaha, another gentleman out in Scotts Bluff are kind of heading up the whole thing as a result of a meeting that was held between Hank Bounds, of course he heads up the university system for University of Nebraska here, and the Governor Ricketts, and the two of them came together. Hank Bounds brought him an example of a report or a process that he developed in Mississippi or was a part of called Blueprint Mississippi. So now here we are doing a Blueprint Nebraska. So it's very exciting, and the very first step of the whole thing is getting people involved at the grassroots level. Fantastic. I can just see them all sitting around 2-3 months ago saying, where do we start with this? You know, we've got this idea over here, we've got the rural sector, we have the urban sector with Omaha and Lincoln and so on. How do we pull all these people together? Because to come up with a vision for the state is one thing, to get it implemented, right, and executed, not so easy, right? But the key idea is this: how are we going to get all these people from various communities with various backgrounds and priorities and interests, how are we going to get this all to work together, right? And their answer was, well, let's listen. Let's ask some questions. Let's get out there in like 32 communities. They've met, as of today, maybe 3 or 4, I'm not sure, but they have a lot of communities they want to get in front of and say, hey, we want to hear your ideas. We want to hear your thoughts. And of course, they steer people to a website. And all of that is excellent. It has a populist nature, and obviously if everybody is given kind of an open opportunity to provide input, then the outcome will be better accepted, and people will hopefully move forward together, locked arm in arm, in terms of helping us achieve what it is that we have to achieve when we get to the top of that summit, that daunting mountain that I've alluded to here. So that's Blueprint Nebraska, and we listened today to the Nebraska Chamber of Commerce. They were kind of the host for the whole thing, along with the Greater Omaha Chamber of Commerce. David Brown was there, of course, and welcomed everybody as he would. And then Brian Sloan, who, as I mentioned, is the new head of the Nebraska Chamber, was kind of one of the keynote speakers. And he really summarized, there was many different speakers, but he really summarized our challenge and our issues eloquently, and I'm so grateful for that. It really put everything in perspective. Now, he used the Nebraska Cornhuskers and the problems they're having at this point, and they are also, we used them as a metaphor, they're kind of also at a crossroads. Everybody in the state of Nebraska realizes this, and the challenges that the new coach Scott Frost has with the team and so on. It's a matter of culture, think about this now insofar as the state of Nebraska is concerned, and unity. So he said, well, the football team has to come together around a culture. They have to believe in certain things. They have to embrace certain values, both on the field and off the field, as well as they have to behave in a unified way. They have to galvanize. They have to come together around a certain set of principles and even a style of operating, right? And that's a great metaphor. It's a very convenient and timely metaphor, because the entire state has finally come to grips with the fact that we are not competitive. We are not competitive. And if you have individual communities or people or groups say, well, we're going to do this or we're going to do that and so on, there is certainly something to be said for that, but it's difficult unless they're connected. And if they're thinking of the whole process, here we go, very important idea. If they're thinking about the whole process systemically is actually a better word. So systems thinking. Some people refer to it as holistic thinking. Very, very important, and it probably isn't being given a lot of attention during this entire process. As we form this statewide coalition, we're sitting around talking about what is the future of the state, what must we become. It was pretty challenging to develop an organization or a community or a state that's going to attract a certain type of person. Now we're talking about people that are currently in their 20s, their 30s, and maybe their 40s, all right? And yet many of the people that are providing input to what I'm discussing with you today are maybe they're 50, 60, 70 years of age. So they're saying, well, I think we need this, or I think we should have this, or it's a shame we don't have that, whatever it is. And everybody's input is so important and it's valuable and it's a piece of the pie, you know. But we may be listening to the wrong people, right? We may not be talking to the people that we actually want to attract. And they have a different take on the world. They value certain things more than other people would. They have a way of thinking about their lifestyle. For instance, they're not as interested in suburban life, right? Suburban life was developed to really suit the baby boomer generation. Many of these people, like myself, born in the 50s, kind of came up through the 60s and the 70s, got our careers going, and we moved to the suburbs. Now, the people that we're trying to attract to this state, they don't find that very attractive. They don't want to go live in the suburbs. They have a different notion about how they want to use their personal time, their discretionary time, how they want to live. And that's perfectly valid, but we have to now, the entire state, understand that. And what does that really mean, right? What does that really mean insofar as what our streets look like, what our communities look like, the message that we send out to the marketplace. You know, as this presentation was unfolding today, and I'm so grateful for it, it really elucidated, shall we say, many of the issues that have been floating around. I've been involved with them for over 15 years, and so they were really interesting. One of the things, though, that again, I think that we're not seeing, say, well, there's all these things, there's all these qualities that we have. Here's how to pitch our state. That's really what it came down to. This was a discussion about marketing. It was also a discussion about, we'll call it product development, all right? If it were a private company, that's who would be in the room, marketing people and product developers, right? But there was a missing piece here as we went through it all. You know, we have pretty good education here in the state. It's a good place. Quality of life, right? Now, it's an interesting thing. Everybody in the room seemed to agree. They were all nodding. Oh yeah, we have great quality of life, good quality of life, right? But of course, that's a very subjective term, right? People define quality of life in different ways. Some people say quality of life is all about culture and the arts and lots of things to do in the evening, or lots of different choices, or et cetera, lots of different ways to form relationships with other people, et cetera. So other people say, well, quality of life to me is having an affordable home and being able to, my kids do well and they can walk home from school. To me, that's quality of life. So I think it's very important that we define quality of life. Otherwise, we're just going to push ourselves into a dark closet and say, hey, everybody come see us. Where is everybody? Where is everybody? We got quality of life over here in Nebraska. Where is everybody? How come you're not in the closet with us? So even as we talk about openness to new ideas and perceptions and concept leadership, we've got to talk about these things. By the way, one of the favorite phrases, though I didn't hear much about it today, is innovation ecosystem. Please keep this in mind. I'm going to repeat it because really, when somebody says, I don't know what to do with this company or this organization or this state, say, take a look at your ecosystem within which you operate and take a look at the innovations that are going on around you and how you can link yourself to those innovations. It's a big deal. Your innovation ecosystem is an extremely important part of transformation. Now, I promise you that what this state needs and what these people today were sharing with me is about transformation. It really is. And we have to look it in the face, look it in the eye, not be afraid of it, move forward and say, what does that really mean? What does transformation mean? Now, when they get out into the field and they're talking to people in all these different areas and so on, we might not hear so much about innovation ecosystems. We may not hear so much about, reinvention. All right? We might hear a lot of ideas that are tweaks, incremental improvements on existing resources and ideas and so on. I want to just warn the leaders of the state, know what we're trying to do here. Doing one thing over here that's kind of a nice little enhancement, we'd like to see that here in Main Street, and we're sure that it would be a good thing. That's one thing. Coming over here and saying, we want to reposition the entire community to be this or to be that. And we want every single piece, whether it's a sidewalk or a sign or a street or a neighborhood or a mayor, to all kind of underscore that idea. That's a different thing. And have beliefs and value systems that support. That's different than fixing the old theater downtown on Main Street and saying, there we are. There's our evidence that we are on board with Blueprint Nebraska. Now, in November and December of this year, that's 2018, there's going to be a lot of discussion around the state about implementation. How do we as a community in Ogallala, Broken Bow, wherever, Chadron, adapt to the principles and the vision, the elusive vision that's coming out of this process? We have to buy into it, first of all. We have to understand how it's going to impact us in a mostly positive way. And then we have to sit around and say, now what are we going to do that kind of gets this done? And when do we know when we're done? Or are we really doing, that we're succeeding, right? Very important. Now I want to wrap up here by coming back to the point that I mentioned before. You don't need to hear me telling you all about all these different elements associated with legislation and so on. Far more people are ahead on that topic. But I want to talk to you about this one word, design. Now, there was no discussion about design today. That word design didn't work its way in. There's no mention of redesigning the state, redesigning the experience, right, of being in the state and being around Nebraska people and what it's like, and why it's different than somebody else, and that little piece, designing those experiences. It's almost like art direction, or if you're staging a play and you have all the props in place and so on and so forth. So the actors, when they come onto the stage, they do certain things. It looks natural. They're reacting to things in a certain well-choreographed way, and everything fits together, right? It's a system for creating a well-designed outcome that's so attractive that not just one person, but many, we're looking for 1 million people. We want people to not leave the state. That's only half the solution, right? And then we want more people who have never been here before to come to the state. And we want their first impression to be so strong that they say, I'm going to move my family here. This is an awesome place to be. It's a pleasant surprise. It's delightful, right? And it doesn't look like what I thought it would look like, and the people are different than what I thought. Now, as I was listening to the message, I'm going to wrap up here briefly. We're talking about transformation. We need to become something completely different, be much more competitive. I'm seeing a banner on the wall, and it says, A Good Life, Nebraska, the Good Life. Now, we all know that's been kind of the formal or informal cut line or moniker for our state for a long time, right? So even while we're talking about being something different, designing a different kind of experience for tourists and employers and workers and so on and so forth, getting all that done, we're still using this phrase, the good life, right? It's not helping us compete necessarily with all these states. Utah, by the way, is the most attractive state to the people. We want to come to our state right here in Nebraska. They're going to Utah. Outdoor resources, beautiful streams and creeks and hunting and mountains and all kinds of cool stuff. That's not our state, right? So we got to dig deep. I mean, we have to really, really think about how to pull opposites together and come up with, design a message and a full experience that immerses people in their 20s, 30s, and 40s in all kinds of qualities and attributes they didn't realize existed here before. Now, this is how we're going to attract capital. This is how we're going to attract entrepreneurs, companies. We have to create cachet around this particular state. We have to become our own brand. And it can't be just a messaging thing, just some superficial thing, some little hook to take the place of the good life or some new rendition. It can't be that, all right? It's got to be the whole package. And we have to come together around it. And what does that mean, right? We have to be ready for that. Because there will be a lot of people that will say, you know, I don't necessarily want to hang out with these people. I don't believe in the world the way they look at it. I don't look at it this way. We have urban and rural people all together. So this is a big, inclusive, diversive idea. So that's Blueprint Nebraska, and my thoughts obviously woven into the entire commentary. I'm Lynn Hinderrocker. Thank you so much for joining me and listening all the way through. You're going to hear more about Blueprint Nebraska. I'm going to interview some of the players, some of the influencers within the entire organization and all the things that are going on statewide. It's a wonderful opportunity for us to think creatively about the future and articulate our vision and then really, really live it all together. Thanks again. We'll see you next time.